Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What are the true origins of the ancient holiday we call Halloween? Do paranormal phenomena really increase during that time? Why did Ben go to school dressed as the Joker yesterday?
Well, hey dear, welcome to the 81st edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and all of those strange questions you heard just came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad.
And we're very happy to have with us today New England historian, author, and authority on all things Blackstone Valley, the great Dave Balfour.
Boy, that's an intro. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome. I do what I can, as somebody I know would say. Dave is going to talk about some of the more bizarre paranormal events to reputedly take place in our little corner of the multiverse.
But before we look at Halloween in depth, let's do our weekly paranormal contest. Phil Petrick from Sacramento, California, got last week's question correct. What did the media call the strange creature seen over a period of 2 years in the mid-70s in the southwest of England? And the answer was Owlman, or the Owlman. Straight up weird. But this question this week is, in Greek mythology, what king tried to pull the wool over Zeus's eyes and was condemned to be a werewolf for the rest of his life? If you
a little bit of a pun there.
Yeah, good job. I'm proud of you. If you have a shot, call us locally at 401-766-1240 or nationally at 800-449-1240. If nobody gets it before the end of the show, drop a line to me at ben@behindtheparanormal.com. Be first to get it right and win an autographed copy of my dad's 2006 book, Turning Home, God's Ghost and Human Destiny.
Well, gentlemen, I'm obliged to wish you happy Halloween.
Okay, well, how do you actually have a happy Halloween?
Well, Ben, judging from the history of this holiday, having a happy Halloween would essentially mean not dying, right? Now, Halloween had its origins in the realization that more people die in the winter than at any other time of year. That's how it started out, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. What are you doing? The mad producer is attacking me. Our remote ancestors were hunter-gatherers or simple farmers, of course. Not big-time geniuses like us who spend $400 a month to heat their houses in the winter. They were close to the earth and were very aware of the cycle of life and death. And this time of year was the bottom of the barrel. For the Celts, many other northern peoples, November 1st was the first day of winter. Now, the Romans, who were not always the fastest critters on their four legs, they had a different calendar, as you know, and for us, to this day, the first day of winter was generally the 21st of December, but that's way out of whack. I think the Celts were closer to the earth and had it better. So anyway, this was the first day of winter for them, or tomorrow would be. They believed that negative entities, as we would say, were most powerful on this day because death was more powerful in the winter. Their rituals involved wearing costumes to either scare these entities or make them think the Celts were demons too. We're not sure. Sometimes the way they acted, I think the latter might be the case. And late in the evenings, they lit big bonfires to encourage the sun to return to full strength in the spring. Now, in places like Iceland and Scotland and a number of others, people still do that today. It always gets me, Ben, people dress up in costumes and they do stuff on certain holidays, and they don't know why. They don't know the origins of these things.
It's just sort of an instinct. They just do it.
Well, they did it because their parents did it, or they did it when they were kids.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah. And anyway, the custom developed to leave gifts out to placate the spirits of the dead. And as I said, the Romans also got into the act. Their holiday of Feralia took place at about this time every year. And they honored their dead, and they also honored Pomona, the goddess of fruit and trees, who would hopefully return in the springtime. Who was I listening to the other day? It was a news commentator who referred to Halloween as the most socialist of holidays. Because kids go out and they go to strangers' houses and they get free stuff from people they don't know and that they didn't earn. Okay, rather cynical in my opinion. Anyway, I always enjoyed Halloween. Anyway, join our discussion today if you'd like. 401-766-1240 locally or 800-449-1240 nationally. And interact. Well, I don't know. I'm going to say interact with us.
No, because no.
Okay, the Facebook system has broken down, so we're going to have to forego that for this show.
Straight now. All right, and Pomona's symbol is the apple. And that may be why we bob for apples on Halloween today.
I have never bobbed for apples on Halloween. Wreaks havoc with the beard. Have you ever bobbed for apples? During your exotic social life here in northern Rhode Island?
If I did, I don't remember.
Okay. That could be good or bad. Anyway, well, but it is a Halloween tradition to do that, and maybe it's because of Pomona, the goddess of the fruit. Now, Christianity came along and influenced these holidays, too, of course. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV established All Saints' Day on November 1st, probably in a deliberate attempt to Christianize the pagan holiday. That's something the church did all the time in the early years to make it easier for pagans to become Christians, especially when the pagans had no choice. Now, all carried over to today, costumes included, in some cultures, especially warmer ones, this time of year has more positive connotations. For example, in Mexico, you have the Day of the Dead, which is a time to honor or even visit with your ancestors. I think that's pretty good. Ancestors are very important in the paranormal and in our spiritual lives, but we in the West, like most things, we don't get it. So anyway, let's introduce Dave here, and we're going to talk about some of the local interesting paranormal allegations that have arisen in our corner here, the Blackstone River Valley in New England. And I've got a list here, and you go right ahead.
All right, well, there are a number of things that people who listened over this radio station to our Blackstone Valley Byways things from time to time.
Oh, by the way, Dave is an author, speaker, a well-known historian in the area here, chairman of the local of the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council, and also a talk show host on this station.
Yep, well, it's kind of a talk show, kind of a joke, fun show. But anyway, on Blackstone Valley Byways, Paul, one of the things I pulled out is this one, and I'll read the script because it's easier than to talk about it. Today, we'll tell the story of the ghost of Monument Square. In order to tell this story, one must try to imagine what Woonsocket's Main Street looked like somewhere around the time of the Revolutionary War. All of Main Street was a wilderness. A deep valley prevailed where the Truman Bypass is, and that is where James Arnold constructed a pump to spread water from an irrigation ditch to a nearby field called Pump Rocks. Somewhere around what is now known as Monument Square stood the remains of an old house which had fallen into ruin and was beyond repair. It was in this house that Moses Arnold, grandson of John, had committed suicide, and he did it in a very unusual and bizarre way. Moses had made up his mind to murder his wife, and he planned to do it by bludgeoning her to death with a hatchet. For an unknown and unstated reason, he couldn't do it. So he took the axe and deliberately chopped himself to death. The cellar walls and part of that chimney remained on the site for many years. Amid the rubble, a tree took root, and it was an ugly tree, deformed and gnarled and horrid-looking in every way. Everyone who walked by seemed to shudder involuntarily. Strange things are reported to have happened in the area around Monument Square, and it's been suggested that the ghost of Moses Arnold is responsible. Several large buildings have burned to the ground, and other unexplained acts have reportedly taken place. When you walk at night around Monument Square, don't tarry too long, because the spirit of Moses Arnold might still be around on a Blackstone Valley byway.
Well, I love that spooky voice, Dave.
Well, you think about the Opera House, the Palace Theater burned down, the building across the street from the Stadium Theater.
Well, there are also
whole
places made of wood too.
Yeah, well, of course, that's got nothing to do with it. Moses Arnold was, But we have a
paranormal pyro here.
A collection of stories that are along those lines, and things that you can see. There's a story of vampires in the Blackstone Valley, and that's fairly interesting.
Something beyond what I've known.
On a recent visit to Union Cemetery in North Smithfield, that's right up the road here, we came upon an interesting inscription in an area belonging to one of the area's earliest families. The stone is marked on the grave of Simon Whipple, the youngest son of Colonel Dexter Aldrich. Don't ask me why the names were different, but they were. And the inscription reads, "Although consumption's vampire grasp has seized the mortal frame." The last line ends with the word mind, and most of the line has been broken off. Cement to repair the stone. It was a mid-19th century name for tuberculosis, possibly for cancer. It was being complained of vampirism. But listen to this. Page 1 of Volume 4 of the Cumberland Town Records states that on February 8, 1796, Stephen Staples petitioned the town council for permission to dig up the body of Abigail Staples because she was rising from the grave each night to drain the blood of her 8 sisters and brothers. In all probability, the entire Staples family was wasting away from TB, or consumption, as it was called. But vampires in the Blackstone Valley? Another bit of history.
Well, I got you there. That story's in my 1998 book, Faces at the Window.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it is, and which I've often enjoyed reading. The story of the whole thing is Stephen Staples' grave is in the Staples family cemetery, but his daughter's is not. At least we couldn't find it. But Stephen's is there. So they probably took her stone and moved it because people were looking around for vampires in the Blackstone Valley. But there are a bunch of things that you have talked in your books, and I think I've read almost all of them, if not all of them, that you've produced, because for the audience's edification, Paul and I have been good friends for half a century, I guess, or almost.
Well, getting there. Don't rush it.
There's an interesting story about a professional ghost hunter who ran a company who operated expensive electronic equipment in a cemetery to record sounds from a different electronic plane. Now, you've done that. To some degree.
I operate kind of on a different level, but yeah, sometimes with electronics
Mike McGinnis told
have
me
some relevance occasionally.
The cemetery was very old, dating back to the time of the American Revolution, and after recording, the equipment allegedly was returned to the laboratory, and all the tapes were played with outside noises removed, and what they finally heard was a young man's voice saying, "I can't find me stone." Now, you figure that out. It turned out that the headstones had been removed for a cemetery renovation, and some of them were not replaced where they originally had been. Cause for thought. You think about what could be happening in and around a neighborhood cemetery, even if it's on a Blackstone Valley byway.
Well, I don't. Some of these things sometimes I think, and Ben and I have talked about this. I wonder if the phenomena are not cooked up to, or rather, the stories behind the phenomena are not cooked up to explain the phenomenon.
Oh, I'm sure.
Now, the Blackstone Valley. Now, the guy who chopped himself to death. I mean, that would be really. That would be a good one. I mean, are you sure? How accurate is that story? Do you know?
That's in a book on Blackstone Valley lore. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't, because you can't find the exact spot.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's been a lot of buildings burned down, but as you said, they were all made of wood.
The whole city was made of wood.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a story. I think that it's like the ghost of Fisher Road. Now, that's another. Well, I'll be honest.
Is that
with
the
you.
one that went near the reservoir?
It is, but that's not the story you're thinking of. The one you're thinking of. Let me read you this one first, and then I'll talk about the one you're thinking of. Most local residents know that the water supply for the city of Pawtucket comes from 2 reservoirs in the Arnold Mills section of Cumberland. 2 interesting stories about the area come to mind, and both remind the visitor to the area that the land under the reservoir was once inhabited by farms, sawmills, and gristmills, and perhaps even family cemeteries. Old maps and books tell the story of a headless ghost on horseback who drags a log behind him on a golden chain as he rides along Fisher Road.
I've heard of that.
The middle part of Fisher Road is now abandoned, and both ends still exist. So if you're driving or walking on either end, be ever vigilant. The night rider of Fisher Road might still be around. Now, on the other side of the pond, so to speak, the reservoir, this is something that actually happened to someone that I know very well.
Yes.
They were coming home from New Year's Eve in Boston, or a concert or something. It was the middle of the night, and this person, I'll be honest with you, it's my daughter. I did. She
doesn't live in our listening area.
She can get us on. She does listen to us on the
That's right.
computer at times. But anyway, she was with her brother and some friends, and she swears that she saw a faceless figure dressed entirely in black, no face, standing there looking out over the reservoir in the middle of the night. And we know that there were probably some cemeteries that were flooded there, so in that general area. But she's, I kidded her and said, "How much did you have to drink when you were in Boston?" But nevertheless, that's a story that she'll swear by. She actually saw
I've heard that from other sources as well.
Yeah,
that same kind of thing. Okay, well, this is as good a time as any, I guess, to pause for our commercial break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Our special guest, Dave Balfour, here on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com. Stick with us.
Is your business getting the necessary exposure? American Beauty Sign Works, your local sign experts, can help you answer yes to that question. Whether you're in need of a sign for your new business, a new look for your existing sign, or repair on your electrical sign, they're equipped with the newest sign-making technology and have the expertise to get your business the recognition it needs. Conveniently located at 345 Providence Street in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, American Beauty Signworks strives to help you succeed in properly marketing your business. We offer a large variety of services, including business cards, letterhead, logo design, automobile wraps, awnings, banners, digital graphics, marquees, magnetic, neon, political, and real estate signs, storefronts, vehicle lettering and graphics, vinyl signs, and website design. To find out about the most cost-effective way to market your business, call us at 401-767-2922. Visit us on the web at absignworks.com or come to the shop and meet with Chad or Kurt and get the most from your marketing dollars.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com. Our guest is Dave Balfour, local historian, author, and gentleman par excellence. We're talking about some of the local stories here in our own broadcast area in the Blackstone Valley in New England's lovely southern area here, and where the colors are still pretty bright of the trees. It's supposed to hit 70 today, much to everyone's amazement. So anyway, we're talking about some of the stories, and Ben and I look deeper. This show, we go deeper. We don't just tell ghost stories here.
Exactly.
And you look at some of these stories, and you wonder, were they cooked up to accommodate certain phenomena that were noticed? Now, Dave mentions a lot of the things connected with cemeteries and things, and that's a commonly associated situation when it comes to ghosts. But, most cemeteries I find are very peaceful. Some are active in the sense, but I think that's because of the land they're on, not necessarily what's in the land, so to speak. And not to be unnecessarily vivid, but when you have older cemeteries when they still let nature take its course, without burial vaults and all this, a lot of the elements will return to the soil that conduct electricity. And when you have electromagnetic fields in some of these very, very active areas, then you're going to have more activity. So as far as the guy chopping himself to death, that I'd have to look into. But any time there has been a tremendously traumatic event, it does send out ripples through space-time.
Oh, sure.
You do pick stuff up.
Well, there's one, if you get an older map, a 1950s map of the state of Rhode Island, a highway map, you look up off Route 6 in Foster, and you'll see an area called Ghost Lots. That's on the state
I never heard of it.
State highway map. I remember I first worked for the state in 1966, I think it was 66, and I got some old maps that were being distributed at that point, and it said Ghost Lots. So I wrote this little piece about it because as one walks through the woods and forests of Rhode Island's Blackstone River Valley, we may find ancient cellar holes, which are a reminder of the area's past, and we find a group of cellar holes. We're probably looking at the remains of a small village. Now, you've done this.
Like the one in the Pomfret.
Yeah, Pomfret, Connecticut. Yeah. We're probably looking at the remains of a small village, and it is in these places that strange tales abound. Tales not only of ghosts, but of strange sounds. Sounds of people talking, laughing, and having fun. These people are unseen, but not unheard, and parapsychologists have reported evidence of such things in Connecticut. That's you. I got that.
Yeah.
In your case. Just over the state line from Rhode Island in the town of Scituate, the state highway map formerly marked an area off Route 6 as Ghost Lots, and it was reported that people who were sensitive to such things would park on the side of the road to look and listen for sounds from beyond old houses, too. And they have stories to tell. The local residents often report unexplained bumps and sounds in the night. Sounds such as these are explained in the settling of an old house or the wind whistling through the trees. But on chilly October nights, when these sounds are heard and ghostly apparitions seem to float through the air, it might be the product of an overactive imagination, or it could be the reminder that those who have gone before us want us to see that they still like to be around their old haunts. And I don't have among my files here the story of the Ramtail ghost. But that, in fact, actually took place up in Scituate, up in that area.
We had that with Tom D'Agostino was on the show. That's his specialty, that case.
Yeah.
And he reported on that.
Well, he lives up there. He does this stuff up in
he lives in Putnam.
He does things with the restaurant up there in Chepachet.
Yeah, he's a good friend of ours. Yeah.
But that Ramtail ghost thing apparently has been substantiated. Ramtail Road is the name of the road. And if you drive down that road, you'll find a flat place near the river where the brook where the Ramtail mill stood. And apparently the miller committed suicide by hanging himself by the bell rope.
Well, that's one story.
And people can hear the sounds of the looms in the old mill. They can hear it out on Route 6, they say. I've never heard it, but they say that you can hear it out there. And
I've never heard it either because I haven't gone. But again, these things in our theory, this is not spirits of anybody who's died. This is, I should have combed my hair this morning. This is.
Oh, you're looking at yourself on the.
I was on the monitor. This is.
We'll have the company beautician come in, right away.
Yes.
They do that.
But this is the actual mill operating in whatever year, and we're hearing it through the veil of, if you want to call it veil of time, because that's the way time works. There isn't any past, future. It's all right then, and the energies are right. You see the people here, they're going about their day. In that case in Pomfret, that's in the eastern edge of our listening area. That area, you'd walk in and you'd hear. We tell the story of the ox cart that went by that we couldn't see it, you could hear it. And that's what made me wonder. Are there ghosts of ox carts and all these different things? But you'd also hear farm implements. Banging together. You'd be 5-10 feet away, right next to you. Some guy, carrying his scythes or whatever, out to his field, and whatever year it was, and you could hear it. The dogs. I had one run right by me at one point. You could kind of almost feel the wind, and then this dog, he started barking over there. Couldn't see it. Just like that. Maybe it was you. And we went to great pains to make sure there was nobody else in this area, et cetera, et cetera. Ben, I was going to ask you, what you circulate in the among the younger folks of the valley here. They ever tell you stories of stuff that they hear, knowing that you are an investigator?
Actually, yeah, but I don't remember most of them.
Yeah.
Because people are like, I went to this place. You should I can't remember where it was, but
just as well. We don't want to say it on the air anyway.
Yeah, it was like a lot. It was like this place where a lot of people go to, and he went with a couple of his friends. And they saw like this car coming, and they dived in the bushes because they thought it was like a cop or something. Mm-hmm. And they saw one kid get up out of the bushes, and they saw the light from his phone because he was texting. And they didn't know who the kid was, and people got out of the car, and they were talking to this kid. Then they turn around, and then like the light from the phone is gone, and some other kid turns on his phone. The kid that had the phone on before was gone.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, some kid I used to work with told me that.
Wow.
I was just like, wow, that's
one of the great things about Ben is, kids will tell him stuff they won't tell me if we're on a case, if there were any kids involved, and it's kind of a good kind of team effort there, and Ben is a very trustworthy guy, and people like to talk to him. So that's very interesting. I'm going to ask you off the air where that was.
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, okay, but I'll get it out of your friends. Okay.
Well, no, you don't know the kid.
You had one that I went with you on because I found it for you, and they had another paranormal investigator there too. A case of a young teenage girl who was actually having conversations with some people in black that lived near the area, and the mother said that the girl preferred to talk to this other person because she was younger and so forth and so on. And that goes along with what you say about Ben. That particular case happened right in Cumberland, and a certain area in the backyard, I guess it was, that there was you could sense a figure. And she's actually claiming
I remember that. Yeah.
She saw these people dressed in black, and they were out there. That's the time warp theory, I suppose.
Well, the whole planet. I'm always saying the whole planet is quote unquote haunted. It's not. People ask me if New England has more, and maybe in a way it's been occupied longer by Europeans, if that means anything. And it's more crowded, in a sense.
Well, that way. Old houses. The first book that I ever wrote.
There are haunted new houses, too.
When I was a vice president of the New England Council for Economic Development in Boston, one of my jobs was I had to write a book, publish a book every year. It was pretty much an update every year called Historic Houses and Museums of New England, and it was just a listing. Just say you can't copyright a list, but many of those houses allegedly had spirits in them. The Ocean-born Mary House in New Hampshire, which is one that you've investigated, I think, in the past.
Well, I investigated and came to the conclusion it was a hoax.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that out there that people feel that, and unfortunately, tourism is not blessed by people who feel that if they spread a rumor about a place being haunted, that the company will come and will pay money to go and visit this.
That's right.
Walk through it. We're a ghost lot or something. It's 50 cents, and can't you feel the presence of these people? There's one of them that's a particularly interesting. Aaron Woonsocket would tell the story of haunted mills in the area. On the banks of the Blackstone River, near the bridge that marks where we keep the Blackstone Valley Explorer, the bridge in Cumberland opposite the town hall, is a mill. There used to be, I forget the name of it, the Cadillac Mill, I guess it was called.
Cadillac Lounge.
No, not the Cadillac Lounge. You let your son go to those places? I mean,
I'm not even 21.
Only in the line of
Is that place haunted by the spirit of a
Cadillac?
a dancer or something?
No.
All right.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, this mill in Cumberland has originated hauntings and strange paranormal activities concerning mill workers who met their demise while working at the looms. It was there at the end of the 19th century that a worker was killed when her hair was caught on a machine. And a century later, a night watchman, true story on this one, a night watchman reportedly walked off the job after seeing the specter of a headless person walking in the building. Whatever the case, and whether or not you believe in such things, strange stories and strange happenings around in old mill buildings, and every now and then we run into someone who had actually had a frightening experience with someone from the spirit world. And again, call Paulino if you know anybody that has had such an experience, and let him know about it. He and Ben can find out whether it's true or not. But this happened I've heard this from several different sources, that people that worked in the night watchman down there in that mill, there's a bunch of small businesses in there, and that they've been frightened to death of things.
Yeah, I've heard different things too. But well, again, some of these things you have to take with a grain of salt, sometimes with a pillar of salt, because stories get started, they get embellished, and you especially find that when it comes to schools. You mention the word ghost or anything in a school, and it will be embellished and carried on for generations. And of course, in Footsteps in the Attic, my book from 2002, you have the story of Room 305. And to this day, I've never even told you what town that was.
No, you have not.
In Massachusetts, and the school committee called me in, and it was really I will say it was in the Blackstone Valley, so it's relevant. And they made me swear, and this is in the early 90s, they made me swear, they made me sign a paper that I would not write about the thing for 5 years, and that or speak about it, and that I would never reveal the name of the town. I think they were rightly so. I had to meet with the school committee. The superintendent was there during the whole investigation. It was really annoying. Yeah. But he got scared to death, served him right. We were in this room, and the furniture started to move, and you could hear footsteps up and down the blackboard and then up and down the windows where this particular teacher used to walk. And it was getting to the point where people would teach a class in that room, and the young people would be very unruly. The janitors didn't like to go in there because everything they did was undone by somebody else.
You could smell chalk in there, couldn't you?
You could smell chalk. You could see chalk dust. Yeah. At this particular manifestation. So again, was this the dead teacher? No, nobody's dead. Dead is impossible in the multiverse. This is a teacher in 1934 going about her day. I don't know, it was 1934, but around that time. She was pancaked by a trolley car at some point. Not to make light of it, but that's who apparently it was. And it was her. That's the way her personality was. And that's because to think that if you're in some sort of spirit world or you're a spirit, is to completely negate the influence of your body on who you are. And unless you are a ferocious dualist in the Greek philosophical sense of the word, then you can't accept that. Our bodies are intimate parts of us. Our memories, our experiences, and everything else. So without your body, are you still you? I don't think so.
Well, your multiverse theory works, especially with people who have lost a loved one, I think. I know more...
Well, I got piles of emails every week from people about that. Yeah.
The spirit is still around, and
no, it's not the spirit; it's the actual person.
I was sitting watching television, wide awake one night, and I felt someone stroking my hair, and my wife died 4 years ago now.
Is it that long?
She was in a nursing home for a year before that. Yeah, it was 4 years. Yeah. Last week, Autumn Fest, she died. That was another interesting thing. The night she died in Landmark, and the fireworks went off at the same time.
Interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, I have felt somebody stroking my hair, and more recently, I had a dream one night. And it was very interesting because I woke up and I don't know whether I said it out loud or just said it to myself. But I said, "You woke me up," and her voice, clear as a bell, laughing, said, "I didn't wake you up." Uh-huh. And then I went back to sleep. So I mean, that theory that people are still there and still around certainly is interesting, and I think I run into more and more people who have felt that feeling.
I could be wrong, and I often duel on the show with traditional ghost hunters who believe in the 19th century spiritualist version, and I just don't accept that. But maybe they're right, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but this seems to work out for what I've done, and then now Ben too. It seems to stand up, and it seems to explain things that were previously unexplained.
Well, yours is more realistic than people walking around with white bed sheets over their heads and holes cut in their eyes.
Well, actually, I actually did that. To get back to the Ramtail situation, when I was editor of the Observer newspaper here in Smithfield,
which is now owned by the Valley Breeze.
Now owned by the Valley Breeze, and couldn't have happened to a better company, I think. I was the photographer cajoled me to. Do you remember when it used to have the full page picture in front?
Sure.
It was a tabloid newspaper.
What was the name that ran that place? I think the lady that ran it.
That was Mrs. Burgess. The Burgess family
yeah.
for many years ran that paper. And so the photographer cajoled me to go out on Route 6 there.
Yep.
And to sit in the cemetery at the end of Ramtail Road with a sheet over myself, my glasses over the sheet, reading this ancient book sitting on a tombstone. Okay. And I don't know. There must have been.
So we could take a picture. Okay.
Well, there must have been 5 people who almost had accidents, driving by. They kind of. And that was the front page of the paper that week. They didn't know it was me. It was me sitting there with the Halloween issue of the Observer that particular week.
That is indeed funny.
But that's about as far as I've gone into that particular case. Our friend Tom D'Agostino has. So
well, that's been around for a long time. If you look at the state of Rhode Island published work back when I worked in the Development Council in the 1960s. Rhode Island Ghost Tales, and that was one of the stories, the lead story in that thing.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the major ones in the state.
That was when Leonard Panaggio, who was a good friend of mine,
and
90 years old and still writing,
Yeah.
lives in Newport, he had put that thing together on Rhode Island Ghost Tales, and that was one of the big stories.
Excellent. Well, I knew Len back when I was an editor, and one of the things, once I was out of the seminary, I figured I don't have to keep this secret anymore. But then when you're the editor of the local newspaper, you can't exactly be the local ghost hunter either. It doesn't do much for your journalistic credibility, so I still had to keep my mouth. Anyway, there's the issue. Now, Ben has explored our hill. We live on Fairmount Hill over here. I guess that's what it's called. And it's a relatively large place. On the top of it is St. Antoine's Health Center, a retirement home and assisted living facility.
Yeah.
And you said there was an airport up there.
There was at one time. Was one airport.
Really?
Right on top of the hill where the St. Antoine is.
I never realized that till I heard you on the show.
Well, that's another thing. See, I never realized it either, but I read that people were flying airplanes out of the Western Woonsocket Airport. And I said, Western Woonsocket. The airport was over on Diamond Hill Road.
Yeah.
And so I double-checked to where it was, and there it was, right up there.
Wow. But that hill is a very strange place, and Ben has explored the woods there with his friends.
That place is wicked creepy at night.
Very thoroughly. Tell us about some of this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Let's go in chronological order. When I was like 5 years old, maybe like younger than that, I went in the woods with my cousins, and we like got maybe not even that far into it, but then we heard like this weird like growl, and we were like, what was that? And we saw these dogs run by. I was like, oh, it must have been the dogs. We turned back around. We see like this giant like circle. I can't even remember like how to describe it, but it had like these green eyes like staring us down. Immediately we bolted out of there.
This is a broad daylight too, isn't it?
Yeah. It was in the middle of the day, and I didn't go in the woods for another couple weeks. Then went back in. Yeah. But like one time I was walking home from work, and I live like right down the hill, so I can just walk through the woods, and
you worked at St. Antoine's.
Yes. And it was like, it was just like the sun just went down, and it had just rained, so it was kind of cloudy out. And I looked over, and I saw like this thing turn around and look at me, and I immediately like bolted down the hill. I almost slipped and died like 3 times. Somehow I didn't die. I don't really know how, but I was just like,
I'm very glad you did.
I just felt compelled to like run, and I just booked it out of there.
It's funny. I think we deal with the Mothman thing a lot, and one of the most striking characteristics of the Mothman appearances which happened in the Ohio Valley most recently in the 60s was the tremendous fear that people would feel when they would see this thing, and that's perfectly understandable. An 8-foot thing with no head and big burning eyes, but they said it went beyond that. That it was just abject, dark fear.
Yeah.
When these people would, and that's the first thing I thought of when Ben told that story. But several of these things have been in the presence of witnesses.
I used to be a Boy Scout commissioner at one time, and Horace Hamer was the guy's name, whose last I heard of was in upstate New York, running the Boy Scout Council. But when he was a Scout executive, he was telling a story that he took a bunch of kids out, and he had his dog with him, German Shepherd, and he totally forgot the dog was with him. And he's telling this made-up ghost story about the green-eyed monster.
Yeah.
And the fire is roaring in front of them, and the kids are in a semicircle around him, and the dog just happened to sit up, and he'd forgotten the dog was there, and he said all of a sudden what these kids saw with just the dog's eyes reflected a fire, and he said the kids all screamed and all got up and ran and everything else. So there was a logical explanation for what they saw. But with his story about the green-eyed monster,
no place like the Boy Scouts for experiencing these interesting.
Oh, we'd go to the cemetery and we'd get a name off a gravestone and then tell the story about this spooky stuff. And,
well, the stuff we went into was all true. I'm afraid. Okay, we're going to take our commercial break. We'll be right back behind the paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno with our guest Dave Balfour. Stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
Return to this radio frequency.
They're trying to kill us. Okay. We're back behind the paranormal.
Oh, look at Brittany. She's turning bright red.
That's all right. All our
good.
producers have strange things happen to them.
It's
also
on Halloween.
It
always happens on
Halloween.
Halloween.
So
There's one thing we didn't talk about, the Devil's Hole.
I was just going to bring up the Devil's Hole.
Yeah.
But let me tell people where we are first.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we're back on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com with Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. If you've noticed, on our new schedule, we are on ON here now, back on our old slot of 11 to 12 Eastern Time, 8 Pacific Time on Saturday morning. So bear with us. And as always, our podcasts are available free at BehindTheParanormal.com. Ben just brought up the Devil's Hole, which we found very interesting. Now, Dave, have you ever heard of the Devil's Hole story?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. We believe we live about 200 yards from it.
Yeah, out in the backyard.
Yeah. And as we said, our hill is very strange. A lot of odd effects take place there, such as the cat who apports himself through solid walls and then kind of smiles at you.
The cat's the man. He just
that cat
appears.
is amazing.
He just appears everywhere. Then stretches his body around, and it doesn't even make any sense how he's still alive.
It's amazing. Yeah, this cat is. He belongs to a neighbor of ours. He thinks he belongs to us.
He's a nice cat.
Oh, you've met him, yeah.
He's
a real sweet. He's the sweetest cat I think I've ever known, but he is really ultra weird. He, at least on 7 occasions, he has apported himself, in other words, seemingly transported himself through the solid wall into our house, and when everything was shut, everything was locked, and I can't find any explanation for it other than that he's super cool. He also is able to contort himself. He's sort of a contortionist. He'll lie his front legs one direction and his back legs the other direction, and we think it's hilarious. We take pictures of it. Anyway, he's really cool. But that's just one of the odd things that happens on this hill. The legend is that a priest, and this sounds like a French-Canadian legend, transported, because there are a lot of French-Canadians in Woonsocket here, people of French-Canadian descent. Matter of fact, the joke in Rhode Island is you have to have your passport when you come to Woonsocket. But in any case, you had this cave, and the priest supposedly drove the devil back into the cave through prayer. When this was, nobody knows, 19th century. And associated with this also were small dark figures, cowled figures. And what else? Wolves?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember most of the others. I remember there were gnomes or something.
Something like that, yeah. And it sounds like just a story. But, everything in folklore has some kind of grain of truth to it. And I remember Ben's older brother Jonathan went outside the house to take some pictures of some stars one time, and he came back in. He said, "Look at this," and it was a cowled figure that came out in the photograph. And they said, "Okay." Our photo expert looked at it. He's usually a killjoy, but he said, "No, he can't explain it." So, the Devil's Hole? I don't know. What have you heard about it, Dave?
Nothing other than what you just told, and of course the cowled figure could well be making sure that the devil is not coming out of his hole. He put him there. He's going to make sure he's there.
Well, the cowled figure is not the priest, because we run into these cowled figures all the time in parasite cases. And I do mean all the time. Yeah. They seem to be, whether archetypes or something that people seem to see in these cases. And we get usually 10 to 15 requests a day for help in cases like this. At least half of them mention that they have seen dark, shadowy, and or cowled figures.
Okay. Well,
so, I mean, that's, I don't really associate them with clergy in this case. But anyway.
I've run into, people talking about cowled figures. I always looked upon them as being clerical people, whether that particular priest or not.
Well, I've known some clerics who would fit the negative profile.
That they're out there trying to make sure that the devil doesn't come out of his hole. Of course, the story of the devil's quote-unquote visit to Quonset Point on Devil's Foot Road. There's a rock down there, and if you look at it, you find emblazoned in that rock cloven hoof marks. They're there. You can see them. And maybe the rock started to melt one day, and a local cow got stuck on it or something.
Is it that big? Is it big as a cow? Because you might say it's a fossil.
It's big. It's fossilized something. It's for sure. But it's in this big rock, unless they blew it away because they made a major entrance into Quonset Point down there in the industrial park. Now they might have done something to it, but it was there, and as far as I know, it's still there. But Devil's Foot Road was the mark of the devil's visit to that area.
Interesting. So. Yeah, the names of places will tell you a lot about them.
Yeah, sure.
Interesting. One thing we had here in Woonsocket was sort of our own saint.
Yeah, Rose Farrell.
I usually don't associate that with the paranormal, but I had an interesting experience regarding her. So, can you tell the story of Rose Farrell?
Well, she lived on Providence Street, and she apparently was a stigmata. I mean, you could see the hands and feet where the wounds of Christ appeared on her.
Her body, apparently.
She died, and she's buried over in Precious Blood Cemetery, and the diocese investigated it and said there's no truth to it. And don't believe it, and it's not true, and it's a hoax, and all of this. But nevertheless, there are people that, for a long time, there was a chapel set up in the house that she lived in.
The rosary there, the first Sunday of every month.
Whatever the case may be, she is certainly respected by a number of people. And
there is a website, I think.
Yeah, that she's got, and the Precious Blood, the diocese or whoever manages the cemetery, actually put a halt to people coming on the anniversary of her death and leaving candy and flowers and all kinds of things on her gravesite, which the candy was a little ridiculous because there were all kinds of wildlife were coming out of the woods and everything else up there.
The coyotes with sugar highs.
But that is certainly a 20th century story of what's happening.
Well, let me tell you what happened to me up there. All right, and this is again Precious Blood Cemetery. Which is right on the border, really, of Blackstone, Massachusetts, and it's in Woonsocket. And Marie Rose Farron, her grave is a flat slab.
Yeah.
Okay. And with some flowers around, and then her biography.
It's marked.
It's well marked. And I go in there to take a picture of a very striking structure, which is actually the pillars on the grave of Aaron Pothier, who was the first. French governor of Rhode Island of French descent, French-Canadian descent, and a lovely, lovely tomb up there. And I was taking some shots, and the sky is it's just the layout of the land is very conducive to photography. And I can't remember what I was trying to illustrate, but that's why I was there. And I happened to go over to Marie Rose Farron's grave, and I took a series of 5 shots, which were on slide film. I was amazed at what I saw. The first one came out entirely black. And this is a $1,200 camera. You don't expect that. The light was perfectly good. The second one was a little bit lighter, and you could start to see her stone. The third one there was light coming from her stone. And in the fourth one, you could see it was illuminating the stones around her grave. And everything else was dark. The fifth one was relatively normal. And in the ensuing ones, you could see that the cloud formations in the sky behind the scene were the same. So, I mean, it certainly proved that that was what it was. And I have never been able to explain it. I don't try, I suppose. If there was something paranormal here, it certainly seemed to manifest itself. But, again, one does respect holiness, you know.
Absolutely.
And there were political reasons why. I'm not saying I, advocate one way or the other, but there were political reasons why the church did not pursue that investigation.
Sure.
The Sentinelist controversy was going on at the time.
Yeah, that was something else everyone saw.
Yeah, where some of the French Canadians did not want to share their parishes with other Catholics, which is a no-no in canon law, and all this is going on, and they were afraid if they had their own saint that they wouldn't be uncontrollable.
Well, there was a lot of that stuff going on too here.
It was back in the 30s. And
yeah,
40s.
Not only was that the case with the Sentinelist movement with the French, but when the Italians came to Blackstone Valley, they wanted to know where to go to church, and condescendingly, the people at St. Charles, which was an Irish parish, said, "Well, they can meet in the basement of our church."
Yeah,
that's kind of like black people on the back of the bus, you know.
Yeah,
that's exactly what
happened.
It
wasn't
here.
just the people of French descent who were at fault here, canonically speaking. Now there is. We talked about the vampire case. There's the issue of the secret cellar.
I haven't heard that one.
That was in Cumberland, and it was a case. I haven't mentioned it for a while, but everybody in New England thinks any house built before 1850 was used in the underground.
Oh yeah, I get that every day.
All the time. Which was the system of transportation of escaped slaves from the South before the war between the states up to Canada, where they were able to be released and had some freedom. But the house in question was not. It's on the historic register in Cumberland, which, as you remember, I edited.
Yes.
And you were in charge of. And it was not used in the Underground Railroad. But there is a secret cellar, as they say. And I think that at the risk of being melodramatic, there really is somebody buried there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the story you often get. And you get out into this cellar, and you'd feel extremely depressed. Very, very serious energies in this place. And to make a long story short, what we did was to say that these people should send out compassion, love. The answers to these things are often very simple because they were having some problems in the house, and all good things pray for this person, toward whoever this would be. And the name Kevin had come up, and wouldn't you know, they really, really put their backs into that. And I got a call later on that the young girl had a dream. The young girl was the one to whom most of the things were happening, seeing various things, and there were apparitions and all. And the young girl said, it was beautiful. I had a dream that this Kevin was out in the backyard with me, rocking me in a hammock in an area where our good friend Joe Frisello, the engineer, had pointed out that there seemed to be some energy and high water table, all of which contribute to these energies. And that this person had the most beautiful smile on his face. Yeah. And it brought tears to your eyes just to hear her describe this. And I've been down there since, and the feeling is much, much more light than it was. And what's happening here? I mean, when you reach across, and this is a beautiful thing, people don't realize what they're dealing with when they're dealing with quote-unquote ghosts. They're not dealing with somebody who's died. They're dealing with real people who you can reach across the boundaries of these universes and take their hands and help them. I think that's the most beautiful thing. And that's what happened here. This guy, whatever trauma he was going through that sent out all this, this alarm through space-time, was heard by someone from another world. Yeah. And love conquered the distance between these worlds and helped this guy. Yeah. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. And people investigate this stuff and right over the heads. They don't understand what's happening. They don't get it. Anyway, that's our story of the secret cellar. But that was.
It's a very interesting story, and stories like that have happened. I know a fellow that was driving his car in a blizzard and couldn't find his way home, and a car pulled up beside him, and the guy said, "Follow my taillights." Mm-hmm. And he followed them, and when he got to the road that led him to the street he lived on, he looked up, and the guy was gone. It totally disappeared. Yep. And he felt there was a guardian angel there somewhere.
Why not? I believe it. It's happened to me. Yeah. A lot more dramatically than that. We have an email here from Marty in Millville, Massachusetts, and Marty writes, do you know, and this is for all of, do you know if there have been any sightings of the Sasquatch in the Blackstone Valley? Mr. Foote.
Not Mr. Foote.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess that thing I saw after work that one time, I guess you could count that.
Because you used to come down through those woods when you worked up there very frequently, right?
Yeah, actually I did. Very often, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I just, like, I don't know, I always loved, like, exploring those woods, but never at night. No, not my thing.
Yeah,
There was just something about them. It was just so, you're not supposed to go in there.
There's this hill again we're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's kind of like The Village, you know, the movie M. Night Shyamalan. Like, the ending was horrible. The rest of the movie was fine, though.
Okay. I have heard of a Bigfoot sighting in, not Millville, I believe it was Blackstone, in one of the more rural areas. This whole area is relatively rural, except for maybe downtown Woonsocket. I know I have interviewed.
That was at one time rural too.
Yeah, that's right. I have interviewed at length members of the Rhode Island National Guard who have reported Bigfoot sightings, very close Bigfoot sightings, in the Great Swamp, which is not in the Blackstone Valley, but it's down in southern Rhode Island, and it's a very large wilderness management area. And that's been reported there. So, but every state has had reports of Bigfoot, I think without exception.
I'm not surprised about the Great Swamp because they're the Narragansett Indians who were not nice people to these people. I mean, the colonials were fighting, and the women and children were massacred at the Great Swamp. And that of course, that just, that's against the rules of war, so to speak. That
was terrible. I'm ashamed to say I had an ancestor involved in that.
Yeah, well, that's true. That of course is a part of American history that we don't like to brag
be proud
about
of.
For sure.
No. Yeah. Okay. There was that. Well, I don't know if that answers your question, Marty, but I'd say yes. There have been reports, and one never knows what one's going to see. Because remember, we're full of coyotes now, and all sorts of turkeys that are about as big as Sasquatch. We have some coming through our yard.
Sure.
The bloody guy leads his flock down out of our yard, stops the traffic on Fairmount Street, lets them pass, and then he eyes everybody with a baleful stare, and then goes off. And you should see this guy. Okay, here's another question. This has no name and no state. I don't know where it's from. What is the most haunted spot in Rhode Island, and is it open to the public?
Is it open to the public?
Those are the two big questions. Yeah. It's hard to say what's the most haunted spot anyway, because the whole planet's haunted.
Yeah, and I guess, the legends of hauntings in various places, such as we had mentioned earlier, and up off Route 6, that was once called Ghost Lots up on Ramtail Road. On the other side of Route 6, over in those woods over there, there is no such thing as a most haunted spot. I mean, there are houses that have been haunted, and there are places that have been reportedly haunted, not only in Rhode Island, but in the Blackstone Valley. But, what's one man's feast is another man's poison. I mean, some people see these things and have the sense of finding them, others of them don't. So it's really hard to answer that question. I don't think there's anything that's the most haunted places, but there are houses in Rhode Island. If you know where a place that people are talking about that has it's quote unquote haunted, tell Paul about it and find out. He's a paranormal investigator. We'll go in there and find out. Paranormal investigators, good ones, and you see this on all these television shows that they debunk the thing that they're supposed to be finding in some cases.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I got through debunking stuff a long time ago. You're doing this for 40 years, and finally you get to the conclusion. Everybody, billions of people in previous generations didn't question this stuff.
Yeah.
And they realized there was God, there was all these paranormal things. These things happened. They weren't able to really explain them, but they happened. What's our problem? We have this stupid materialist approach to everything, and this a scientific method that'll build your house, but it's not going to explain and define reality. Sure. Get over it. And I've said that. I said that on Coast to Coast. George said, "Well, I can see. Put it that way. Yeah. And tonight, by the way, and tomorrow night, just to give you a hint, on our CBS broadcast, we're going to have Dr. Michael Persinger, who is probably the old-time, a wonderful guy, but an old-time skeptic. And it's going to be he invented the God helmet, which you put on, and it will stimulate near-death experiences, religious experience, and everything else. And his implication is that means it's not real, so, bye-bye. I don't believe that at all. How does that mean it's not real? It confirms it, if anything else. It's saying just because it happens in the brain, it's not objectively real. Where's he coming from? So I don't know. He's going to argue with somebody with an Eastern point of view.
Well, a lot of people do that.
Anyway, okay, we got 3 minutes left, and we cannot let any show on the Blackstone Valley spookiness pass without mentioning our good friend Joe Ferrier.
Oh, yes.
Who was who has a talk show on this station and was on our show a few months ago. who is just a wonderful, wonderful guy in general, but also was a leading UFO expert.
He is today. He tries to escape it sometimes, but he.
I can't imagine why, with all the weird stuff that happens to us.
He's actually taking pictures of UFOs right over.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. There's some on our website too, on the Talking Points page for his show. So check that out, folks. BehindTheParanormal.com, and our best wishes on Halloween to our good friend Joe Ferrier, whom we hope to have back very soon to talk about UFOs around here.
Yeah, Joe's very good, and of course he runs Joe's Moldy Oldies up there on Rathman Street.
It's just a great place if you like old comic books, old records, things like that. It's just terrific.
Old books about the paranormal.
Absolutely. So Ben, why don't you take it away here?
All right. Yeah, exactly. So many thanks to our producer, Brittany, and Craig, of course. And we'll see you right here next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Pacific and 4 Pacific on WOON 1240 a.m. and onworldwide.com, when our guest will be Shane Sorosi, or Sirio. How do you pronounce
it? Sorois.
Sorois? All right, Sorois. In our own opinion, in New Hampshire's pride among paranormal investigators, for a look at the media circus behind the paranormal today.
Yeah, Shane's been on the receiving end of some very strange stuff from the networks, and I think that'll be very, very interesting for you to see. And we're going to leave you with a thought from American author Tom Robbins: stay committed to your decisions, but stay flexible in your approach.
Oh boy!
And it's kind of deep. I like that.
Okay, see you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.